I'd like to introduce Helen O'Neill from Scotland. Helen has ME. Welcome, Helen.
Hi, Linda.
Could you tell us, when were you diagnosed with ME?
I was diagnosed with ME in February 1999, shortly after the birth of my first child.
And how old were you at the time?
26 years old then.
What was the actual symptoms that you had at that time? Was it straight after the birth?
Yes, I became acutely unwell shortly after my daughter was born, certainly within the first couple of weeks. I had lots of symptoms that I hadn't had before. I suffered badly with muscle spasms and muscle twitching. I was in a lot of pain, especially lymphatic pain. I had tenderness under my armpits, constant sore throat. I was very mentally and physically fatigued all the time. So, I wasn't really able to function.
What did the doctors say at that time?
The doctors didn't really say very much, but they ran the usual batch of tests, most of which come back normal. The only one that was slightly abnormal was my thyroid function, which was borderline hyper, but on retest it came back fine. Mm-hmm. But obviously my symptoms weren't getting any better, and I knew that this wasn't normal for me. So I ended up going into hospital for a couple of days to have further tests done, more in-depth tests. Mm-hmm. And the only thing that showed up in these tests was that my spleen was enlarged, which didn't mean anything to me at all at the time. But now I can see that was probably a sign that my immune system was struggling. So I wasn't offered any treatment, and I was diagnosed with ME.
How old was your daughter?
4 months old. So it was actually quite quick in comparison with some people. Yeah.
So what happened then after you were diagnosed?
After I was diagnosed, I saw my GP at the time. We were living in another part of Germany then, and he, the letter said chronic fatigue syndrome, and he asked me if I knew what that was, and I said, well, not really. And when he mentioned the ME, I knew I'd heard of that before, mainly because a football player in Scotland ended his playing career, and it was, when I was growing up, I was aware of that, and I didn't really know much else about it other than that. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't offered any treatment. I was told basically just to go on with things. And obviously this was 1999. I didn't have any internet access. I didn't, had a young baby to look after. So I didn't really give it any more thought, because I had trust in the doctors, and if, at the time he was telling me there was nothing that could be done.
A young mother with a new baby, that's very draining for people who have got energy, isn't it? It
yes.
must have been very difficult with a new baby, feeling so fatigued.
It was. It certainly was. So I relied heavily on my husband at the time, obviously, and family to help me. And within about a year, I felt my health was starting to stabilise to a degree whereby I was able to function more normally, but I still wasn't the way I used to be before I had her, but obviously I had no treatment. And in the years afterwards, my health continued to yo-yo. I had spells whereby I felt very unwell, just with the same symptoms coming back, and each time I went to my GP, I was told the same thing: sorry, there's nothing that can be done. This kind of carried on until we moved to Colchester in 2005, and my health just went from bad to worse. I remember at one point I had just a kind of minor flu type virus. I wouldn't even call it the flu. It was like a cold. And within about 2 weeks of recovering, I just hit the floor really, and I never get back up again. I felt absolutely awful. I had chronic pain all over, the lymphatic pain, the tenderness, my throat was sore. I just couldn't do anything really, and I spent most of the day in bed. My brain wouldn't function. It was just awful really.
How did you learn about LDN?
Well, I learned about LDN because one of my aunts in Scotland, she was one of the few people in Scotland that knew how ill I was, obviously living in Essex, didn't want to worry the family, you know, especially my mum, who tends to worry about everybody, and there's 8 children in our family, so 8 children in my family, so that's a lot of worrying if you if you take on board everyone's life. But my aunt, who I'm very close to, she spent a lot of time with us, helping with the children and that. And my aunt, on returning to Scotland from one of her trips to visit Essex and obviously spend time with us, she was watching a news article in Scottish News, and it mentioned a doctor in Scotland who was using low-dose naltrexone to treat MS patients, and it also mentioned other autoimmune diseases. So my aunt was the first person to tell me about low-dose naltrexone, and I researched it myself at this point. I made an appointment to go and see the doctor in Scotland, but I also spoke to my GP in Colchester, and I took her some information on low-dose naltrexone, but she wasn't interested, unfortunately, and she made it quite clear that she wouldn't prescribe it to me. So, you know, I started LDN, well, I've been on it for 2 years and 3 months now. You know, I decided I had nothing to lose and hopefully a lot to gain, which is why I went for it in the end.
Did you have any initial side effects when you started LDN?
None whatsoever.
So what did it do to help with your symptoms, and how long did it take?
I knew for sure it was helping me within 6 months, about the 6 month period. Obviously I started at a very small dose, 0.5 milligrams daily, and I increased it very slowly. You mentioned side effects there, and the only problem that I encountered was going from 2 mils to 3 mils, where my head felt quite fuzzy. So I've dropped the dose back down again to 2 mils, and I very gradually increased it, and I suffered no problems at all doing that. But the key for me was a very slow increase, all the way up to, you know, I'm just under 4 mils at the moment, and that's where I've been for months now, and I'm quite happy there. But it's helped me immensely. I don't suffer any symptoms at all now. Even saying that, I can't quite believe it, but it's, you know, it's true. It's made all the difference to me. I don't have any pain. My cognitive problems are completely gone. You know, I sleep regular now. I don't have any problems with my sleep at all. I used to really suffer badly with unrefreshing sleep. You know, I'd be sleeping all the time, but still feeling as if I hadn't slept.
Yes.
And I don't have any of those symptoms at all anymore.
That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
What do your husband and children think?
They're absolutely delighted. You know, in the age they're at now, my daughter's 12 years old and my son's 10, and they're at an age whereby they remember what I used to be like. So they know that the person they've got now is different from the person they had 3 years ago. So it's wonderful, and you know, my husband as well, he's absolutely delighted.
So he's having some time where he doesn't have to do all the housework and looking after the children.
Exactly, yeah. I run rings round everyone, really.
Well, that's fantastic. What would you say to other people with ME who are thinking of trying LDN, who are a bit sceptical?
I thought long and hard about this question, actually. I would tell them to speak to others who have used it. They can, which obviously via LDN Research Trust is a perfect place to do that. Research the facts as best you can on your own. Speak to your own GP. I would always suggest that people do that, because you never know. Educating a doctor's a wonderful thing as well. A lot of them don't know anything at all about LDN. I would say that you've got nothing to lose and a lot to gain. So, and also, if you do try it, give it time. You know, I know some people notice differences immediately, but the way I looked at it was, I considered how sick that I was and how long I had been ill for. And you know, LDN doesn't cure your symptoms, but it helps your body to heal, and that in turn helps you to overcome the illness that's affecting you. So be patient.
Yes. And I'd like to say thank you, Helen, for all the people that we've put in touch with you, for you to share your experience with them, to let them have somebody to talk to. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you.
It's the least I can do.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your continued support and sharing your story with us today.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, thank you.